My name is Kerry. It's a great honor to be here and part of this very exciting event. So thank you to the MTN team for including us, and to all of you for giving up your time to be here. I hope I can share something you haven't heard before. Are we there? Great. I was going to give this presentation with my colleague Tumi. Unfortunately, she's very ill today, so I am going to be doing her bit as well as my bit. Hence, I'm a little nervous, so I hope you'll bear with me. As was mentioned earlier, I have only recently joined Silicon Cape. I joined Silicon Cape in February, and I've had quite a steep learning curve coming from a more expansive non-profit background and organizational development background. And I've come into the organization at a time when it is doing a lot of reflection on where it sits in the ecosystem and how the ecosystem has evolved since we started. So I'd like to spend some time with you today sharing the exciting work that's happening in the ecosystem, talk a little bit about our organization and what we do and where we're hoping to go, and then build on some of what has been said already with regard to the fourth industrial revolution and the opportunities that Silicon Cape sees for the ecosystem locally. As a matter of interest, how many people in the room have heard of Silicon Cape? Great, this is going to make my life much easier, and hopefully we can make the presentation quicker and we can get ourselves back on track for time. So as you all know, Silicon Cape is a term that refers both to the ecosystem as a whole, for the high growth tech-enabled startup space in the Greater Cape Town area. And then it's the name of our organization, a non-profit that works as an ecosystem enabler to that space. The name obviously echoes some of the other spaces around the world: Silicon Valley in San Francisco, Silicon Savannah in Nairobi, Silicon Wadi in Israel. And that's a really important part of our branding. We want to be associated with those other hubs and recognize those potential partnerships and connections that can be made. As an organization, we aim to support, connect, and promote the stakeholders in this ecosystem. We connect stakeholders through a wide range of networking opportunities. We host events. We promote our partners' events. We try to connect stakeholders with other capacity building operations. We also profile work. So through our various communication channels, we've built up quite a following. We have a newsletter database of over 7,000 people. We target people with news that we think they need to hear and about really exciting projects that are happening in the Cape Town space. We also work in the entrepreneurial development space, not as direct capacity builders, but as support to those capacity builders, and making sure that entrepreneurs get access to opportunities such as displaying through exhibitions and trade shows. Often the big conferences and trade shows don't think about how to bring entrepreneurs into that space. It becomes very expensive for entrepreneurs to gain access to those kinds of platforms. So our role as an ecosystem enabler is to motivate for startup pavilions and argue why we want to bring a group of our entrepreneur members into that space. We also work in the advocacy space. So we do quite a lot of work working with government and other key players in the system to make sure that the policy frameworks are supportive and make sense for the kind of work that all of you are doing. To do this work, it's really important that we leverage partnerships. We are a very small team. We're based downstairs, so welcome to our world. And we can't do this work without very key partnerships. It's important for us to be making partnerships locally, but more importantly, it's how do we then grow the marketplace for our members outside of the wider Cape Town area. Silicon Cape as an organization was started when two venture capitalists traveling back from San Francisco were sitting in the airport and thinking, there is so much about San Francisco that is similar to Cape Town, just from a general geographic point of view. Why can't we have Cape Town be the hub in the same way San Francisco and Silicon Valley is for that continent? Why can't Cape Town do that for South Africa and the African continent? And so this started in around 2007, grew into 2009 as a passion project from representatives in the ecosystem, volunteering their time to promote the ecosystem and grow the ecosystem. And as you all know, since 2009, the ecosystem has grown dramatically. It's expanded. There are so many more players in the space, which is terribly exciting. But it does mean the role of Silicon Cape now needs to evolve too. So in 2016, we were formally registered as a non-profit company. We now have a small board of directors, 4 volunteer directors. We have an operational team of 3 dynamic women. I'm very proud to be part of that team. And then we have our community council, which is made up of elected members from the stakeholder community who keep us connected to and relevant to our stakeholders. We have 4 key objectives that we work towards and around which our theory of change has been created. Critically, and what I've spoken about, we need to ensure that our stakeholders have access to the non-financial capital resources needed to do the work that you all do. We have to create those spaces for you to network, to seek advice, to find ways to grow your personal capacity and your business opportunities. And then critically, our objective number 2, which has become a real driving force for the organization at the moment, we are very committed and recognize the need to support access to opportunities within the ecosystem from stakeholders who've been marginalized in the past. Silicon Cape wants to become the key banner bearer for inclusion and diversity in an ecosystem that in the past has somewhat been lacking. As I mentioned before, we can't do this without our strategic partnerships, and we work hard to promote Cape Town as a dynamic and successful location for tech-enabled business. I've spent a lot of time referring to this word ecosystem, so I just want to spend a few minutes highlighting who we consider as part of our ecosystem. At the center, obviously, are entrepreneurs and owner-managers, without which all these other stakeholders wouldn't have a role to play. So that's our key focus. It's important for us in Cape Town to recognize that about 60% of all South African startups are based in Cape Town. So there really is a strong, dynamic, central cog for our work to happen here. Our first group of stakeholders is what we call our financiers, our angel investors, our venture capitalists, investment funds, government to a certain degree. And I just thought I'd share with you some of these statistics which are quite interesting. That between 2015 and 2016, the number of South African venture capital transactions was up by 134%. That's a massive jump. And 30% of those investments were included in the ICT sector. Silicon Cape believes that that number is actually higher. The definition of ICT is very narrow, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. 56% of all deals in South Africa were concluded in the Western Cape, and over 1,200 early-stage investors invested in South Africa, which is very exciting for startups and for SMEs like yourself. There is interest in what is happening here. There is interest in the kind of projects and ideas coming out of our region. The next group is what we call our supporters and capacitators. Cape Town is home to over 25 accelerator and incubator programs and over 25 co-working spaces. So we're very excited to have you here at Workshop 17 today. There are a number of co-working spaces around the city like this, and they really are dynamic places for entrepreneurs to bounce ideas off each other, to connect. It can be very lonely. Sometimes you just need someone to say, you're on the right track, keep going, stay with it, and that could be someone who just shares a hot desk next to you. The third group is our service providers. There are a number of law firms, PR companies, accounting firms who are starting to recognize the value in building relationships early on with businesses and are targeting their products to better serve the entrepreneurial SME owner-manager space. So it's really important for our organization and the ecosystem to bring those people in, because they might be some of the big law firms. For example, I know Webber Wentzel, Bowman Gilfillan, they have programs that target entrepreneurs and small businesses. But sometimes small businesses feel too intimidated to approach a large corporate. They think it's going to be too expensive. They're not really going to understand my needs. So we need to, as an ecosystem enabler, make sure those conversations are happening more effectively. And then, of course, the last piece of the puzzle is the customers or the clients. And this is obviously a very broad range of people: corporate companies, people running supply chains, business to business, government, and private individuals. The key sectors we're seeing happening here for our ecosystem include retail, tourism, sustainable energy, and asset management. Just want to say a lot of this information is available. It was from work done by City of Cape Town and Westgrow, and we're very grateful that they have it available to us. The infographic on the wall downstairs is the previous year's work in line to this. So now I just want to go back to the Fourth Industrial Revolution briefly for a moment. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I hope I'm not going to bore you too much, but I just want to emphasize some of what came up. I think there's a lot of parallel in what was said earlier and what I'm hoping to say. But just so we're all speaking the same language, and perhaps some of you, I know the Fourth Industrial Revolution was a term I had heard many a time, and I had a vague understanding of what it was, but it was helpful for me early on to just bed down exactly what I understood Fourth Industrial Revolution to be, so that I felt confident when talking to people that we were sharing the same language. So if we think about the industrial revolutions that have come before, the first one used water and steam power, to mechanize production. And That was back in 1784. Just cast your mind back, time travel for a little bit. The second used electric power to create mass production. We're looking in the late 1800s. The third, which is I think the one we're all more familiar with, from 1969, used electronics and information technology, really around personal computing and the internet. And now the fourth industrial revolution is starting. And it's building on the third and taking us into a world that I don't think we've yet really gotten to grips with how it's going to change the way we do work and the way we live. I think what's the critical nugget for me about the fourth industrial revolution is it brings together the digital, the physical, and the biological. There's no longer this gap between what we consider the virtual or digital world and the real nuts and bolts I can touch it world. They are now linked. They're now one and the same. They talk to each other in a way we've never done before. They interact, they talk back. It's a much more integrated system. Klaus Schwab, who was mentioned earlier, he is the person who defined this and has written a lot of the literature around it. So his key point is that it is a fusion of technologies blurring the lines between the digital and the physical. It's marked by emerging technological breakthroughs in a number of fields, including robotics, blockchain, nanotechnology, quantum computing, the Internet of Things, etc. A quote from Klaus Schwab which really struck me was that the fourth industrial revolution is not going to change what we are doing, but it's going to change us. This is not external anymore. This is really about changing who we are and what we are. So in short, to me, this revolution is about connecting and integrating. It's about how the digital and the physical work together for greater impact and for positive impact. And that's something I want to spend some time about. Why does this matter? The short and very glib answer is, it's coming whether we're ready or not. I thought this stat was fascinating and terrifying in the same time. By 2020, the average person will have more conversation with bots than with their spouse. I think that puts it really into perspective. It's a little scary, but it's also kind of interesting. Because I think people look to chatbots as AI and quite scary and they're going to take over the world. But there are lots of things that we could use them for in ways we're not thinking about yet. The other thing that I think is important to bear in mind, this quote from George Bezos from Amazon, he said he's always asked what's going to change in the next 10 years? What are going to be the trends? What's going to change? And his response is always, I'm never asked what's not going to change. Change is inevitable. It's happening to you whether you want it to or not, and it's coming to a town near you. So that's the short answer why it should matter. You may not, and this was touched on earlier, you may not consider your company yet a digital or a tech company. It doesn't mean that you can't avoid the necessary digital transformation that is required to remain relevant and sustainable as we move forward. It's about improving your access to market. It's about increasing your production efficiencies, improving your customer interaction, etc. So we have to start thinking about, are we upskilling our staff and our team in a way that they're going to feel ready and confident? And do we have the supportive, brave leadership in place that's going to be tolerant of failure, willing to experiment, and willing to try? That jumping in. Are we ready to jump in, and are we ready to let our team jump in a way that is supportive? So it's coming whether we like it or not, but I'd like to challenge you to think that there's another reason why this matters. And I think it's a world-changing and, dare I say, a world-saving reason. So bear with me while I get a little inspirational, potentially, hopefully. But also, I have a challenge for you. So Silicon Cape has been hosting a series of dialogues during the month of April. We are listening to our stakeholders and getting a sense of the issues that they believe are coming down the pipeline and that they think the ecosystem is going to have to respond to. And there's something very interesting coming out of these dialogues. There's a recognition that radical system-wide innovation is happening faster and faster. So that's the line. If time is the bottom axis and technical advancement the vertical axis, it's happening quicker than we ever anticipated. But there's also a recognition that those advancements are still serving an elite, small group of the world population. They're serving the wealthy people, well-resourced people, with nice-to-have products and services. It's not yet changing the world. It's fun, you know. We get to play VR games that are very exciting. We get to run around in driverless cars, which is very exciting. But it's not affecting those large, intractable societal problems. So while technology might be doing that, there's a feeling that for the most of the world, technology is growing, but not nearly at the same rate. And what that means is that gap is going to just keep getting bigger and bigger. So what's been happening and coming out of our conversations is that there's a concern that our technical advancements are actually, and our need for connection are actually dehumanizing us in a way. That we're avoiding talking to each other one-on-one. We're not actually connecting. All of this promise of connection is deconnecting us. And I'm saying us in the world, I'm not talking about us locally, because our members highlighted what they think is a key strength for the South African ecosystem and Africa and an African ecosystem, is that we have not yet fallen into this trap. Because the technology perhaps hasn't taken us hold as much yet, we can see the pitfalls coming. And because we have a culture in this ecosystem and in these countries where we face the challenges, the developing challenges face on. We see them every day, we feel them all the time. It's impossible for us to ignore. And for a lot of our entrepreneurs in our ecosystem, the social capital gains are visible. There is value in addressing those intractable problems. It's not just about the financial capital wins. And that to me is very exciting, because what that means is that potentially we stand on the brink of a technological evolution, this is from Klaus Schwab again, that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know how it will unfold, but one thing is clear. The response must be integrated, comprehensive, involving all stakeholders from public and private. So we all have a responsibility to get on board this train to make sure it goes in the direction we want it to go. To make sure it goes in the direction of reaching everyone and including everyone so no one is left behind. The proponents of the Fourth Industrial Revolution argue that only by ensuring the Fourth Industrial Revolution really does improve the state of the world, that's the only way we address these freight trains that are coming towards us of joblessness, low productivity, and massive inequality. So we have to be thoughtful and very specific and work with intention, and that's the challenge I want to leave you with on that front. I was going to play a movie, but I'm not going to. You can check it out online if you really want to. I'm going to save us some time and skip right ahead. If there's one thing you take away from what I say today, I'd like it to be this. The idea of a tech sector doesn't really exist anymore. Tech is not a vertical. You don't work in the digital space anymore. Tech is the tool. Tech is the enabler that crosses all of our verticals. We've had entrepreneurs come to us and tell me they're going to solve world poverty with blockchain. I'm like, that's really exciting. How are you going to do that? No, with blockchain. I'm like, no. There has to be a solution, and tech is your tool. I do think blockchain has some exciting applications to deal with world poverty, but blockchain in itself is just a decentralized data system. It's not the solution. So how are we going to find our solutions and match that to the exciting tech availability to take our businesses and approach some of these social challenges? I'm going to spend a little bit of time with numbers, but I'm hoping you're still with me, because this is a bit of how it's going to relate to your work in Cape Town. So this is just echoing what I was saying. It's not a simple software solution. If you're making ladders or you're writing software, you're a digital company. If you're building chairs, you need to be a digital company. And that's a bit scary and a bit intimidating, but there are ways to work with that. The digital space in South Africa has always been interesting and diverse. We have a very unique relationship with digital. We have very different market needs and unique challenges with regards particularly to affordability and accessibility, which means we can't just follow what's been done before, particularly from the global north. We have to do it our way and recognize our specific context and market needs. So a few numbers for you. We need to know that over 75% of all web traffic in South Africa comes from mobile devices. So if you are conducting any work online, you need to make sure that your applications, that your websites are mobile responsive. We need to acknowledge that social media users have increased by 15% and recognize that there are 40 million more potential users. This is a huge market. South Africa has a total population of 55 million, an urbanization rate of 66%, and 52% of the population, that 28.6 million, utilize the internet in some format. So it's important to interrogate the narrative that I don't need to be digital because my clients aren't working in that space. I don't need to be online. The kind of people I'm working with, they don't have internet access. The numbers say differently. Yes, context matters. Yes, it's important to recognize who you're talking to. But that overriding narrative has proven to be false. That 52% has increased 7% since January last year. So it's growing, and it's growing fast. Digital transformation, it's a buzzword. Oh, we love buzzwords in this sector. And then they mean different things to different people, and no one knows what they're talking about anymore. So it's the process of using technology to radically change your business. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But it's important to remember that changing the nature of an organization means changing the way we work. So it means changing people. It means changing mindsets. It means changing daily work processes and strategies that people have relied on for a long time. And we all know people don't like change. Change is very hard for people, especially in teams. So it's important to recognize that this is going to be difficult for your team and make sure you're being that supportive, brave leader for them. Changing people is possibly the most difficult change to make in an organization, but it's also going to have the most worthwhile rewards, taking advantage of more business opportunities and taking your growth further and further. Worldwide, digital transformation could be worth $18 trillion in additional revenue, according to IDC. Meanwhile, Gartner's CIO agenda suggests that digital business will represent an average of 36% of a business's overall revenue by 2020. We're in 2018. It's coming, and it's coming fast. Gartner's IT market clocks, digital transformation demands rapid IT modernization, found that 66% of companies doing digital transformation expected to generate more revenue, and 48% predict that more business will arrive through that digital change. The reasons they are doing this digital transformation is mostly to empower employees with digital tools, recognizing the value that those employees need in this space, and to reduce costs. 39% of the survey respondents said digital transformation is reducing their costs. Obviously, SMEs are pivotal players within our economy. We've spoken about that earlier today. Constitutes about 14% of South Africa's employment. So having a strong online presence and recognizing how your business can grow through digital transformation is critical to the national economy. It's not just about you. So I'm appealing to your greater good now. I'm hoping that'll work. Sorry, this was going to be to me section, which is why I have to keep checking my notes. I apologize. We really wanted to emphasize that tech is actually about people. I think we forget that a lot of the time. We think, oh, the technology will solve the problem. Toyota is now employing more people to help train the machines. So we went the machine route, and we realized that the machines by themselves are actually not what changes the world and promotes good business. The people are really, really important. Just very quickly on e-commerce, buying and selling products online. It's a huge industry. Total global spend of $1.9 trillion annually in an e-commerce world. 8% of the global retail currently. And how do South Africans use e-commerce? So it's still small by global standards, but big locally. So $2.3 billion in South Africa annually on e-commerce. And there are roughly an estimated 17 million users locally who are using e-commerce platforms, which is roughly 31% of our population. There's an estimated spend per user annually of $136 on e-commerce, which is about 1,800 Rand. How much of that 1,800 Rand a year are you accessing? Any of it, some of it, could be accessing more of it possibly? Something to think about. We all have an iceberg. We're only at the tip. Okay, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about two of our ecosystem members, because I think they're really great examples of how it may not originally have been seen as a tech business, but how tech has really taken them forward. How many of you here know Yoko? That's what I thought. How many of you are using Yoko? A fair number of you, which is great. So for most of you if there's anyone who doesn't know, it's a point of sale app and card reader to enable SMMEs to receive card transactions. They have achieved over 3,000 small business users on their platform from 2016 alone, and they are integrating now with Xero, which is a New Zealand-based cloud solution, accounting software for SMEs. And what's great about Yoko as an example for us is how, what we were talking about earlier, how these kind of potential solutions coming from business to drive social change. So Yoko is a financial inclusion business, from my point of view. They're making financial services available to small businesses who didn't have it available to them initially, because going through the traditional banking route wasn't available either from a cost or infrastructure point of view. So since launching its mobile card acceptance in 2015, Yoko has grown its base to over 14,500 merchants and is adding 1,200 new merchants every month. They're just growing exponentially. The company's growth is a result of its innovative distribution through its online store, where 80% of the card readers are sold. But now, interestingly, they're also getting their bricks and mortar stores up and running, making them even more accessible to a wider market. The next example I want to talk about is Sweep South. Again, how many people have heard of Sweep South? Fantastic, easy peasy. So Sweep South was started by a Cape Town entrepreneur. And for those of you who don't know, it's an online booking platform for homeowners and home renters to connect with domestic workers. And what's so exciting to us at Silicon Cape about this is that it's really a social change platform again. I think most of you will know that the domestic worker population in South Africa is highly marginalized, overly exploited, and really underprotected. And what's great about Sweep South is it provides a service that everyone needs, but it also makes sure that a particular labor force in South Africa is protected. They provide flexible working opportunities at decent rates for over 1.2 million domestic workers at the moment. They pay 3 times more than the minimum wage, which is more than most other cleaning companies. And obviously the flexibility allows domestic workers to choose which days they work and where they work. It puts a higher value on the service that's being provided. And that's really, really important and really exciting to us. But again, a business that wasn't initially about tech. It was about talent search. It was about labor. But applying tech in an innovative way changed the game entirely. Just to highlight a couple of the other businesses doing work in our ecosystem, fintech, edutech, and travel tech are 3 key growth sectors for us. And there are a lot of very interesting players. Spoken a bit about Yoko. I think some of you will know of Zono and Jumo, who are also in the financial inclusion space, making financial services available through mobile wallets, mobile money across the continent. Get Smarter, which is an online learning platform, just got bought out by 2U, a large American online learning consortium. The travel tech is very interesting. There are lots of very great, really exciting companies taking tech and applying it to the way they share tourism and travel in their space. Gaming, apps, and entertainment may seem like a more obvious sector. E-commerce, I'm sure you've all, if not used some of these sites, know about some of them. Digital services, we've spoken about Sweep South, Order In, those kinds of restaurant connections. Again, takeout delivery, not necessarily a technology company, but changing the game through tech. And health and biotech are very exciting growth sectors for Cape Town, especially with our connections to the broader Stellenbosch area. So just to leave you with this emphasis, technology is about people. You have to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. I just really want to urge you, don't start with the tech. Start with your business truths and then find the tech that makes sense for you. So I hope that I've challenged you a little bit to think about how the 4th Industrial Revolution could be a tool for growth in your business. And I hope you're starting to imagine how your business could possibly join the tech ecosystem if you're not part of it already. And I look forward to meeting you all as part of the future Silicon Cape ecosystem. Thank you all for your time today.